to the Just Be Better podcast. I'm Vicky, your host, and I invite you to join us as we explore real, raw journeys of professional personal growth. Enjoy insightful interviews and transformative stories designed to inspire excellence in your own life. And I'm so excited to have with us today a thought leader, an incredible confidence coach. I had the pleasure of meeting her while she was still studying for her degree, and today she's here to share her insights on her professional journey, which I know will be incredibly inspiring to all of us. Welcome to the show, Robyn. Introduce yourself to our viewers.
Yeah, hi, nice to be here. So like Vicky said, I'm Robyn. I am the confidence coach. So I am an EMCC accredited coach. And I, like Vicky touched on, I did a master's in applied positive psychology and coaching psychology in 2020, which was a crazy year for us all. And yeah, I've just turned 30. I've had a pretty wiggly and crazy career path. And yeah, so I'm working currently in coaching and development.
I think a lot of people heard coaching in general. How did you decide to be a confidence coach, and why exactly confidence?
A really good question. So I felt really lost actually in my early 20s and after I did my first degree. And confidence is something that I've battled with, I suppose. And that might come as a shock to you, Vicky, because I do present as quite a confident person in real life. But I suppose it's that internal confidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that self-doubt and the negative self-talk and all of those things. And I thought to myself, there is not one person on this planet that has not been negatively affected by the lack of confidence in one area of their life, at least, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, if I've felt those things, and I know that to be true about other people struggling with confidence at times, then this is something we should be talking about. I don't even think with your good friends you sit down and say, oh, how confident do you feel today? Like, it's just not a conversation we have. I think it's a muscle that we grow, right? Like we just talking about training, it's a muscle that we train like any other. So I think if I can really help people optimize any bits of confidence they do have and then develop that into a stronger, bigger muscle, then that's a mission I'm really excited about.
You made me think that I definitely never sat down with my friends and just thought, I was like, oh, I'm not feeling confident about this or that.
And I think we might say it in other language, right? It might be that you might say, I'm going for this interview and I'm not sure, or I'm seeing this guy at the moment and I don't really know how to. So we might present it in other ways and not use the word confidence or self-doubt or those other words that are kind of not really in common language. So we might skirt around it, but I don't think we often actually tackle the main thing, which is confidence.
I think it's a very incredible field. And especially nowadays when there's so many coaches, that actually brings me to my next question. How do you feel about the current culture of coaching and all of the coaches popping up left and right in the industries?
Literally. So I started coaching 7 years ago. And although it was really an established industry then, much fewer people knew what it was or had ever really heard that term in a way that we use it. They might have heard of sports coaches or maybe business coaches, but kind of general life coaches or confidence coaches, for example, maybe not so much. And I wrote down a stat and I thought it was so interesting. The coaching industry market size is estimated to now have reached £20 billion grossing per year. And PwC reports that the coaching industry is the second fastest growing sector in the whole world. The 7 years that I've been practicing has absolutely, that was never the case back then. And now the only thing that frustrates me sometimes is anyone can go on a one-day course, get a little certificate and call themselves a coach. And while ever I love the enthusiasm behind that, for wanting to try new things, I also think it can be a bit of a cowboy country where it's not always regulated in the right way. And with things like this, you can cause a bit of damage and people are vulnerable with you and you've got to be really careful. So that's the thing that frustrates me about the industry of coaching sometimes, that anyone can kind of give it a go and not really be doing it in a safe and correct way. Do you know what I mean?
I recently finished my coaching certification. I've done 6 months on solution focused and I'm working towards ICF now.
Amazing.
But I think to me, when I started learning and attending classes, one thing that I really quickly realized how little I knew about coaching and how many ethical things you have to know and how many things just in general, how to ask questions, how not to imply your opinions, how not to push your opinions. And then I started thinking through my experience with some coaches that I had in my career. And I was like, they were not coaches, they were mentors at best, or sometimes not even mentors, sometimes just people telling me what to do. So I asked the question about how you feel about it in general. And being a qualified coach yourself, what do you think are the main misconceptions that people see in coaching?
I don't know what the common conceptions or misconceptions are actually, but the ones I've faced, I think in my time of doing it, I think a lot of people scoff a little bit when you say I'm a coach. They're like, oh, are you? They kind of roll their eyes a bit. And I think maybe that's off the back of, I don't know if you've ever seen Peep Show. Again, it's this guy that kind of does this 1-day course and then bands himself around as this life coach, and really rubbish and giving people all awful advice and everything. So I think a lot of people come to that conclusion like, oh, you just sit around, you tell people what to do. It's bullshit, really. And you touched on it really well. The difference to me between coaching and, say, mentoring, which is also something that I'm really, really involved in, is a mentor is able to say, hey, I'm a few steps further down the line, whatever it is that we're discussing. Here's how I did it. Here's some of the resources that I looked into. Here's X, Y, Z that I did. Do you think that would apply to you? Do you think it wouldn't? How else can I support you to figure out your next steps? Coaching, in my belief, should offer no advice, because you, Vicky, are the expert on yourself and your life. I'm not the expert on Vicky or Vicky's life, right? As a coach, my job is to help you untangle everything that it is that you are trying to figure out in part of yourself or your life. And then as a result of untangling everything, how to then feel kind of knowledgeable and empowered to say, right, here's this, here's this, here's this, and can now make sense of my stuff. Feel educated and empowered to go through life deliberately rather than just kind of reacting to life around me. And I think it's that difference between, taking an active role in the driving seat of your life rather than just kind of bumbling through life. A life coach or a coach of any kind really should help you to make those decisions in an informed way.
From the misconception perspective, I think what you said about people often confusing mentorship and coaching and guiding and consulting and everything on those hands, it's very, very obvious. I think, especially on social media nowadays, you Google one coach and then everyone's a coach on your, and then you have, I think my worst one was, and no offense to anyone, but I had a 16-year-old girl calling herself a coach because she'd done, as you said, 1-day course, and she was social media influencer that is very dominating the industry at the moment, who earns 30K a month doing coaching, and you can buy her course. And that's a little bit different type of coaching when you can, I wish I could earn 30K a month, but
give it time, Vicky. Who knows?
Yeah, one day maybe. But anyway, taking you back a little bit, when you think of your journey, I know you mentioned at the very beginning a little bit, but if you think throughout your journey, you started at one side, you've done a lot of different things. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are now?
I was always in hospitality. I was a pot washer from the age of 13. I don't think they're called that anymore, but anyway. And then kind of a waitress, and kind of worked my way up through the ranks of hospitality up until university. Then after university, so I did theatre at uni, and after university, I felt so lost. And I was like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. This is a horrible feeling. It was almost like a grief. I just felt so lost and lonely and terrified of everything. And everyone else seemed to be doing amazing, and it was just me that was failing in my head. So then I kind of knew that I wanted to help people. I wanted to work with people, but I didn't know what that looked like. So I thought, do I want to be a therapist? Do I want to be a teacher? What do I want? What is there out there for me? So I tried lots of different industries. I worked in travel as in a mortgage advisory place, very strange, obviously in care, which is where we met, lots of others. And then I kind of coached myself accidentally into realizing that it was coaching that I was looking for. So I kind of sat down and thought, what do I love? What am I really good at? What brings me passion? What are my natural strengths? And I wrote a million lists in my maps and had post-its all over the floor. And then I kind of, from that, began to kind of peel away the stuff that wasn't so relevant and had just a kind of few things in the middle. And I was Googling and looking, and then I came across coaching and I was like, what's that? I've never heard of it before. But I suppose the challenges, I was really limiting myself. I think that those self-limiting beliefs, and just like I said, those things that you take for granted, like I couldn't possibly do that. That's not even in my consideration, because I've already kind of closed it off before I've even thought about it. So those self-limiting beliefs, and I think a lack of confidence, actually. I had no confidence, and I rated myself so poorly. I never believed that I could do my own thing or that I could help anyone. I had such a low opinion. And that was my biggest hurdle. When I began to turn that around, that's when everything began to change for me.
Did I hear you correctly? You went and done theatre in uni?
Yeah, I did theatre, yeah.
How did you decide to go from school to theatre? I think that's my first question, going very back into your past.
So my mum has always been a businesswoman. She is very much a hustler. She's amazing, very resilient, very strong and tough. And she said to me when I was doing my studies in school, go to university and do business. Do business, and then whatever it is that you like, you can do business in. But get those skills, get that knowledge. And I was like, don't really want to, but I'll do it because that's what you think I should do. And then a couple of weeks, or maybe even a couple of days before the deadline, I had this meltdown. And I was like, that doesn't bring me happiness. I'm dreading the thought of studying that for 3 years. That is not who I am. So then she was like, right, if money were not an object and nothing mattered, what would you love to do? What would set your soul on fire? And I said theatre. So she said, okay, do that then. Probably inside, she was probably like screaming. So I did that. And I thought to myself, if I get a rubbish job that I hate, a really boring, grey, dull job for the rest of my life, at least I've had 3 years that I've absolutely loved. And then whatever. I kind of didn't necessarily want a job in theatre or film, but I thought, I'm going to love this, and then we'll see what happens afterwards. So I did that, and I had 3 years, the best 3 years of my life. I absolutely loved every day of it.
And did you ever consider maybe actually changing your mind and pursuing acting or theatre, musical theatre?
I mean, I did all of it. I performed all the time. We wrote a lot of things, and I suppose when you look at what I do, so I coach people, but I also facilitate a lot of workshops. I ran one a couple of weeks ago to 100 people in that room. And I thought to myself, God, there's theatres that seat less than 100 people in London, So actually, although I am myself up there and I'm talking about what I'm talking about, there's an element of performance, right? Where you're having to dig deep and use a lot of the skills that I learned in that time. So I suppose there is an overlap, but I didn't think I ever wanted to be on the West End or auditioning every day or all of that stuff. But I do use all the skills a lot of the time.
I can just think of having very rubbish day and you still know you have 100 people and you need to be this cheerful, confident person. Yeah. And I think that's where the mask of theatre can be very useful.
Yeah, the razzle dazzle. Yeah.
And how does your mom feel now when you actually moved from theatre to coaching?
Yeah, coaching was something she didn't get as well. She was like, I don't know what this is. What are you talking about? And my dad the same. And then as they've seen it unfold and they've seen, I mean, I'm by no means a Tony Robbins, like I'm not a worldwide success, but I've made a career out of it. And now they're like, oh, okay, I get it now. Like now they're seeing it in action. Do you know what I mean? And seeing. So now they get it and they really like it. But before they were like, that sounds ridiculous.
I'm glad they came around. I've seen Tony Robbins quite a few times, not in real, but I've seen his performances and I know quite a few people who went there. The more I looked into it, and again, hopefully I'm not going to offend anyone, but it really looked very cultish to me.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Totally agree. Crazy.
And that's again where my idea of coaching and what coaching should do differs probably from a lot of people, because I couldn't imagine how screaming and crying and shouting is very helpful, being around 200 up to 2,000 people in one room. Yeah, that's just my opinion.
In my head, I'm like, I think community and connecting with other people is really important. But does that still happen in a room full of that many people? Who knows? I haven't been to one. And he seems to do very well and has this massive following. So he's doing something right, for sure. But I totally agree. It can be a bit crazy.
Talking about your personal professional growth in general, if you think through your career, again, you've been through a lot, done a lot of things. What do you think was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome in your career?
There's two actually, and I think one informs the other, right? So I think the biggest challenge that I faced in recent years in my adult career, I suppose, actually was in the time that we knew each other. You know, we were working for this company which provided care to families, right? So we dealt with, I was on the front line of that, I suppose, not providing care myself, but dealing with the carers and the families. So that's a bit of context. And that role happened to span over the time of COVID as well. So there was working all hours that God sent, a lot of burnout, and isolated to our homes, dealing with difficult topics like death or severe illness or even racism when it comes to things like the care providers. And also I was studying full-time for this master's, right? So I faced a severe burnout and I became unresponsive at work one day and I got signed off sick. And that was such an identity crisis for me because I had, like I said about my mum, such a hustler, such a hard worker, so strong. I actually lied. I was signed off for 6 weeks, I think, start to finish, but it was taken a week at a time to see how I was doing. And it was over that winter period over Christmas. And all of December, I was working from home and I sat at my laptop 8:30 till 5:30 because I couldn't bear to tell her that I was off sick. So I just pretended, I just lied that I was still working.
I'm so sorry you had to go through this. That sounds
I mean,
awful.
it's ridiculous. And then I eventually told her, she was like, what the hell have you been doing? Why didn't you just tell me? And I was like, oh, I couldn't. I was in such an awful place. So that was a really horrendous time. But in that time, I found the role that I've just recently been doing. So I've been there couple of years. And I wouldn't have found that role had I not have been in that position. But that was really difficult, right? That was a difficult thing for me to face as a person, thinking I'm not this person, and also just trying to mend myself. So then that was that. But then that informs the past 6 weeks. So 6 weeks ago, I was made redundant with no notice and no pay, nothing at all, just absolutely stripped, which is not great. It's a pretty difficult experience to go through. But from day one, so I got told I was being made redundant. And from day one, I have had the strongest self-belief. And I've sat there every day and thought, what if it all works out? Because I went off sick and it was a horrendous experience. But had that not have happened, I would not have found the job that I've just been made redundant, right? Which was transformative to my life. So because that happened, this worked out. And now I've just been made redundant, but something else is going to work out. Do you know what I mean? So that horrendous, difficult, challenging lesson that I went through has informed this one to be like, okay, this is pretty rubbish, but the next thing is going to work out. And I'll look back to this and be like, oh, that was awful, but it worked out because X, Y, Z. It just hasn't happened yet, but it will. And I think going through that really difficult time has made this one much easier to navigate.
And how are you dealing right now? How are you feeling? Are you okay?
Yeah, I am okay, actually. I've really surprised myself. I thought that I would wallow a lot more than I have. And I thought I'd be really like, oh, everything's awful. But actually, I've got out there every single day and I'm having a million coffee chats and networking and applying for jobs. And like I said, I'm just thinking what is it that's going to land? Something's going to land. Something's going to work out. Just keep going. We don't know what that is yet, right? So let's just find out. Let's see what happens. And I think that curiosity is making it exciting rather than depressing. Do you know what I mean?
100% agree with you. And I really love the positivity in such circumstances because I know how annoying and hard it can be to know that you go to work, everything's fine. Next thing you know, it's like, oh, I have no work to do anymore. So that's new.
Yeah.
That's not how I planned spending the next half a year of my life, but let's try and find something else.
Let's see. Yeah. And paying your bills, like, okay, how's that going to happen? But you figure it out, right?
Yeah, it's a weird thing, I think, in humans that even in the worst case scenarios, you always figure it out. Yeah. It's just somehow happens. I'm not a psychologist, so I can't answer that, but I call it destiny.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've just got to trust it sometimes. And I was talking to someone yesterday and they were saying, oh, how do you, look at your team and look at resilience, and how do you measure how resilient someone is and all this? And it frustrated me a bit because I thought we all, when we have to, whatever circumstances it is that we're faced with, we figure it out. We do. And we're not always put in those difficult situations. So it's hard to test someone's resilience until that resilience is needed. If you're just on a day to day, how are you going to be able to test someone's resilience? It's not being tested or shown. Whereas when someone's back's against the wall and they've got to figure it out, whatever that might be, personal, professional, whatever, we show up and resilience kicks in. But until it's needed, it's hard to know or measure it, I
get really confused when hiring managers tell me that they want to find a resilient person. And to me, resilience at work, unless they're literally in military or something that it's life and death, like what, missing a deadline resilience?
Absolutely. And I think that to me is almost a bit of a red flag as an employer. What are you planning on putting them through?
Yeah.
What kind of toxic environment are they going to have to deal with in that they need such high resilience? Surely they're going to work, they're doing a job that they're equipped to do, and they go home. Apart from stress, of course, we all have to deal with stress. Dealing with stress and being resilient is, like you said, it's a pretty extreme word to throw around for just work. We shouldn't have to be like ready to fight on the front line, unless of course that is your job.
I think after all of the most recent layoffs, hiring companies started to feel more confident that they can be more picky. Like I start looking at the job descriptions, like because that's part of my job, and I just go through the most random job descriptions that has nothing to do with my career. And you see the things that people say in them, and I'm like, what are you hiring for? You're hiring for a sales executive offering 22K, and do you expect them to literally go to war and give their kidney to you if they need to? Like what's happening here? But talking about you, not me, you obviously have a bucket of optimism right now. Do you have any other tricks of how do you keep yourself motivating, and how do you deal with all of the failures and setbacks, and how do you push yourself forward?
Yeah, really interesting that you touched on failures, actually, because when I look at my journey and kind of everything that I've been through and the way that I've developed as a person, I used to take myself so seriously. And I see this now. I didn't really see it at the time. And every failure, every slight setback, I was like, oh, that means that I'm an awful person, that I'm not good enough. And it was such a direct reflection of me and how rubbish I was and how much, like lack of self-belief that I had. And I laugh at that now. I look back and think, God, that's so ridiculous. Like, why just lighten up a bit, especially in those younger years when we're all supposed to kind of get it all wrong, and I just put so much pressure on myself. Whereas now I approach it all with a lot more humility and curiosity and think, okay, that means that I don't know that thing yet, and that's okay. What can I learn here? And oh, okay, I've not really come up against that before. What's that telling me about myself? And I think approaching failure with a much more open and curious mindset rather than a really defensive one, that's been a big shift for me, because I always met failure with defensiveness. I'm not good enough, and what does that mean about me? And really negative. Whereas now it's like, oh my goodness, what a great opportunity to learn something about myself, or to learn a new skill, or learn, a different way of doing something, or being more creative. And I think that shift is something that if I could tell my younger self something, that would be a little tip, I suppose.
Not to stress over things that you shouldn't stress.
Just be like, okay, cool, what can I learn? I'm a great person and that's fine,
Still need to learn that skill. I'm awful at this. If there's a tiniest mistake that I can dwell on, I'll probably be thinking about it for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it is like the tiniest thing. We're like, what on earth? But that's just me. I'm dealing with it. I have therapy.
Really important to note that, Vicky, because A, I was that person, and B, I think so many of us are that person, right? So it's not just you are a human being like the rest of us, and that's really important that everyone knows that everyone else is doing that too. And I think the only thing I would say to all of us is, how much energy does that take up, and what are we really achieving off the back of it? If we are really thinking, okay, how could I do it? Thinking about it in a constructive way. Okay, so I did it this, and this way. that didn't work, and that's fine. So what do I need to tweak? That's a great way of looking at failure. Fine. If you're beating yourself with a stick about it, that's serving no purpose. You're just wasting time and energy and making yourself feel rubbish, which is actually really unproductive. So I think depending on the angle that you're taking when you're thinking about failure, as long as you're thinking, okay, is this furthering me? Yes. Or no. If it's not, shut it down, and that takes practice.
No, I completely agree, but practice is annoying sometimes. I'm obviously joking. But talking about furthering yourself, and what does personal growth looks to you?
Personal growth. I think self-compassion is something that I have learned a lot about. So when I did my master's, I had to do a piece of research, psychological research. And the topic that I chose to research was self-compassion around body image. Because at the time, well, body image is a big passion project for me. That's something else I've really suffered with and struggled with throughout my life. But so that if you're interested in the topic of self-compassion, if you've never heard of that before, it basically means the way in which you treat yourself, which it pretty much in, right? But there's a woman who's done an incredible amount of research and kind of compiled a lot of research around self-compassion. Her name is Kristin Neff. Neff. So Google her, have a look into her. She's got an incredible website, and it explains the different pillars of self-compassion, and lots of activities. Like I said, lots of bits of research. That is something that I think when I speak to people much older than myself, that is one thing that a lot of people say. If I could have just been kinder to myself when I was younger, I was trying so hard. I looked great. I didn't need to think all these horrible things about myself, because it holds you back. It really does stunt you. And actually, if you just cheerlead yourself and support yourself and are much kinder to yourself, A, life is much more enjoyable, and B, everything's just a bit easier. And I've definitely found that over the past few years, since I feel like I found my rhythm and got to know myself a bit better, that self-compassion has been a huge factor in that. And if I could wave my magic wand and give everyone something, it would be self-compassion.
I really love the saying that if you heard someone speaking to your friend the way you speak to yourself, how would you react? And that really put it in my perspective. And then I thought of that and I heard that question, I was like, I'm such a rubbish friend to myself, because I would get into a fist fight probably if someone talked to my friend the way I talk to myself. It's one of the hardest things, because you're the only one who's with your thoughts 24/7.
And it is such a lovely phrase, but it's so much easier said than done when you're in the moment. And this is something I work on really closely with anyone that I work with, whether it's in a group workshop or one-to-one. We do a self-talk journal.
Okay.
At the very start of anything. So if you're a pen and pad type person, or a notes on your phone type person, fine. My homework, and I suppose this is where homework does come into it, because it's that self-reflection piece. I want you to write down every time you notice that you say something negative to yourself, because most people don't even notice that they're doing it. It's just whirring away on autopilot back here, right? They're not even conscious of it, but it's there for all of us, and it's detrimental. And I saw a clip actually of, it was lots of different people, but sat in pairs, as if you and me sat here now, Vicky. And ahead of time, they've written down horrible things that they think or say to themselves, and they have to take it in turns and say it to the other person, and the other person then says whatever their thing is back to them, and they take it in turns, and all of them end up absolutely sobbing, because they're like, I can't say this to you. This is awful. I can't say it out loud to your face. But it's stuff that they say to themselves all the time. And we just take it and we just do it on repeat, right? And so I think that's such an interesting thing to bring up there. And it's so crucial to our day to day, because it really does hold us back, especially when we talk about the topic of confidence.
And do you keep journaling even now in your life, or that just comes and goes when you feel the need? How does that work?
Yeah, so general journaling, I do. Sometimes I do it more regularly than others. The negative self-talk journaling, I'm very acutely aware of mine and I hear them all the time. And so I'm in quite a good habit with challenging those thoughts a little bit more and editing them in real time, because that is the goal, right? Once you become aware of these thoughts, it's how can we stop them in their tracks and say, actually, no, I don't believe you. I'm going to think something more positive. So in terms of that, that's something I'm quite well versed in. But general journaling, I should do it more. I'm a bit naughty sometimes, I forget, but it is a really good practice, I think.
And do you have any other tips under your sleeve or your routines that you do that should help? Might not necessarily always do it yourself, but should help to people?
I think that self-reflection piece generally is really important. Relationship with self, because I think the best advice I can give to anyone wanting to professionally develop is to build relationships with others. But I think anyone can do that, right? But I think you become particularly skilled at building relationships when you've made friends with yourself, and when you know the deepest, darkest parts of your character or your strengths, or where you sometimes don't show up in the best way. I think the more you know yourself, the better you can show up in those relationship building times. But to know yourself, I suppose taking that step back is a bit of that self-reflection, is potentially through having a bit of therapy, is, you know, spending that time alone with yourself rather than always masking it and doing fun things to avoid that time with yourself and that quietness. So that is something that I've, not even necessarily through choice, I've spent a lot of time on my own, but actually I think that's really helped me to develop personally and professionally.
I have quite a lot of people in my circle who, the more I know them, the more I realize that they're not comfortable in their own company. All of my friends were very confused because I literally can stay at home for like a week and don't leave the house and don't speak with anyone. And I was like, I'm very fine with that. Like, I don't need help. I'm actually enjoying the peace and quiet with myself. I'm not scared of my own thoughts.
I think that's such a powerful place to be, because I totally resonate with that. I think if you can spend time alone and you're okay and comfortable in your own company, and it does take practice, and loneliness does happen, of course, but that loneliness can happen when you're in a room full of people too, and you shouldn't fear loneliness, but it's the feelings that we associate with loneliness that I think we fear more than loneliness itself.
I feel like I took you away from career progression into very deep conversations now about resilience and about loneliness, which is very important topics. But talking about your journey, bringing back you to your journey, how do you approach continuous learning in your career path?
Yeah, really good question. Have you heard of the Japanese practice? I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Ikigai?
Probably not.
Okay, so basically it's a bit of a Venn diagram of 3 different circles, I believe, and I'm going to butcher this, but you should. There's a book on it, and basically it's where you will look at things that make you feel passionate, things that you enjoy, things you're good at, and things that you can make money from, right? So it's 3 different, I suppose, and what your ikigai is the thing in the middle that all 3 fits into all 3 circles. And I think that that is a really great practice to do semi-regularly, maybe even once a year, once every 5 years, to kind of make sure that you are still aligned with yourself and growing in a way that you feel happy with, right? Because ultimately contentment is something we should all feel in life. I don't expect everyone to feel ecstatic and happy every day, but to feel content with the life that you're living, I think is not a big thing to ask for, and it is doable, right? So I think doing practices like that, where you are, it's a form of self-reflection, I suppose, but it's not quite as fluffy as some people might look at it. It's actually quite practical. What fits into this circle? What fits into that one? So that kind of approach I think is really good to that continuous learning. And then once you've kind of got an idea of what it is that makes you passionate, what fits into that? So I suppose that can work professionally and personally. And I suppose then once you've got that better understanding of yourself, you know, what sets you on fire, what really does make you feel rubbish, what do you like, what do you not like, what do you want, what do you not want? Once you've got a bit of an understanding of those answers to those questions, you can then explore that. Or if it's in your job role, you know, what characteristics and knowledge and skills should a person in X role be into? So if you just want to tackle it from a professional way, then even just looking into that question, Googling that question, you know, what does a great account manager, what behaviors does a great account manager hold? And making sure, okay, I've got 1, 2, and 3, but actually number 4 I could probably work on. And again, it's just being really honest with yourself. where are those areas that I could grow.
When it comes to your view on the diagram, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name. Where does external feedback comes into it? Does it matter at all in your opinion, or should you just stick with what your gut's saying?
I think it depends. I don't think it's ever a bad thing to seek external feedback. I think we shouldn't rely on external validation and feedback. I think wherever this can come from your gut feeling or your own lived experience, because like I said at the start, I'm the expert on my life, you're the expert on yours. So whenever I can give you feedback, Vicky, ultimately, you know what's best for your life. You know what I mean? And the way that you show up. But I don't ever think it's a bad thing to get external feedback or constructive feedback or anything like that. You know, especially when it comes down to what am I good at? I might think I'm really great at communication, but my friend or my partner or my family might say, oh, don't know, you know, we've had some rocky communication, so maybe that is something you can still work on. So I think, yeah, inviting that feedback in is never a bad thing.
And then looking on your whole journey from where you started and where you are now, obviously thriving in your field, only the best compliments from my side. If someone's aspiring to be you, what advice you could give them to succeed reaching your point?
If I could give advice to someone starting out in developing others or coaching or anything in that kind of field, I think for me, the best use of time at this point is to figure out what angle it is that you're going to enjoy the most and also thrive in the most. So for example, in my experience, when I was younger, I wasn't sure which angle it is. I knew I wanted to help people. I knew I wanted to work with people. But I came to the realization that therapy, for example, would have been a really bad professional direction for me to go in, because I find it really hard to set emotional boundaries, and I absorb, whether I like it or not, it's just a blessing and a curse that I have. I absorb the feeling of the person that I'm interacting with. If I were to go into being a therapist, that would really impact me in a negative way outside of work, because I would feel very heavy. So for example, I looked into all of the different professions within psychology and realized that coaching is really positive, future focused, solution focused, much more proactive and positive. So I knew that for me, that was the best call. So what I would say is, if you're looking into these different kind of professions, understanding yourself a little bit better to know what's going to be the best and most enjoyable career for you, and then working backwards from there, I think, and really information gathering, I think is a really great place to start with things like this.
How do you see coaching evolving?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think I'm really excited about seeing how kind of short form video and online learning is blended with coaching. You know, for example, TikTok is not going away anytime soon. That is very much part of our DNA now and future generations. How are things like that going to be better utilized when it comes to elevating or blending the approach that coaching has to make it maybe more accessible to the normal person and not just executives and not just business leaders? You know, how can Debbie that works at ASDA access coaching? You know, so just making it accessible and available and enjoyable, I suppose, to the normal person rather than just the elite, I suppose, because that's where coaching has kind of sat for a while.
And touching on like social media and TikTok and everything, do you think it does more good right now or more harm to reputation of coaching or psychology in general, to be honest?
Yeah, I think mixture. I think it depends what you are exposed to and what you are aware that you're exposed to. So for example, you made the example of the young woman that you saw, and actually that left a bit of a strange taste in your mouth about coaching, right? So if someone saw her and that was their only exposure to anything in the coaching world, they'd be like, oh, that's not for me. But if they were exposed to someone different that had a really fantastic approach, you know, maybe it would make them want to go and get a coach tomorrow. So I think it depends who you're exposed to and how much patience you have to explore other examples of that thing. Because I think with the rise in short form video and technology and things like TikTok, there's been a massive decline in patience and attention span. So I think having enough of an attention span and enough patience to information gather before you make your conclusion about whether it is coaching, psychology, whatever it might be, I think as long as those two, because it's a great tool, right, to fact find, to get exposure to new things, but only if you're driving it in such a way that you're having that subjective, open-minded view to it, I suppose.
If you could debunk one myth that you know, what would that be?
I think it is that whole idea that a coach is going to come in and solve your life and be like, do this and don't do this. And here's a tick list of how to just thrive and be amazing. That's not how it works. You've got to show up and do that work. You are the expert on your life. And until you start believing that and showing up as that, you're going to keep reacting rather than being proactive participants in your life. So I think the one thing I would like to debunk is that actually a coach is there as a vehicle and as a supporter, not to come in and do the work for you.
No, that's a great one, especially seeing nowadays where everyone's saying that all you need to do is just film one video and you're going to be a millionaire. And it's like, I wish it was that simple.
Yeah, right, don't we all?
But before I let you go, is there a book, a podcast, or any other resource that you would like to share with our viewers that you think would be very beneficial, that helped you, that could help them?
Yeah, for sure. I've got a couple actually. So we touched on failure earlier. There's a great podcast by a woman called Elizabeth Day called How to Fail. And she has amazing guests on it. And basically they sit down and they talk about their 3 biggest failures and why they were amazing and, pivotal in their lives. So, and it also just normalizes the conversation. We all fail, right? So How to Fail is a podcast. A book that really helped me to challenge my sense of identity and negative things that I was clinging to. The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. That was a life-changing book for me. Another book by a guy called James Smith, who is a fitness coach. He's got a few books, but one of them is How to Be Confident. I think it's called that, or just confident.
So. I'm just trying to think. I think it's his second one.
It's yellow. I know that much.
Yeah.
But it might just be called Confidence. But anyway, James Smith, really, really great book. And then an Instagram account I would recommend you follow is called Fuck Being Humble. Sorry to swear.
Oh,
sorry for the sensitive ears.
Totally fine.
But that's a woman called Steph, and her whole mission is to help you to feel comfortable with self-promotion.
I love that.
She's amazing, and I've met her a couple of times. She's amazing. She's also got a book, but that is an Instagram account I'd definitely follow, especially as a woman, because that's something that we find quite challenging for sure.
Perfect. I'll put all of those in the description for the viewers to see. And then next thing to ask is, what's in the future for you? What's next for Robyn?
Yeah, so an absolute shameless plug here. Myself and my co-founder, Eleni Kasparis, are launching a business called Becoming. So we'll basically have 2 main approaches, but the mission is to take people from feeling flat and lost and a bit meh to absolutely feeling fired up and well equipped and thriving. So we'll have a corporate offering where we'll work with businesses to embed mentoring and coaching within a business to kind of facilitate that and then help you get it up and running and then let you run with it. And then we're going to have a kind of normal person offering, I suppose, B2C, for those of us that use the rubbish business jargon, where basically we're tailoring it more towards women, where we can basically restore and empower women at all different parts of their life, from late teenage to menopause. Can we help you and make you feel more confident and empowered to live your life in an amazing way? So that's our mission. So watch this space. It's all to come. Feel free to add us both on LinkedIn. And we do have an Instagram page. We are _becoming, but there's nothing on there yet, but there will be. So watch this space. And we're really excited to be able to support people.
I'm very excited for that. When are you planning on launching?
So we're literally in the tiny baby steps where we're setting up the business. And we've got a couple of pipeline clients that we're working with to kind of pilot some stuff that we're working on. Eleni is amazingly having a baby in August. So we're got a bit of a pre-birth plan and then a post-birth plan, but in the following months we're really going to get some momentum, and then probably this time next year really fully launch.
But that's absolutely amazing. I'm very excited for you. That sounds awesome.
It's going to be amazing. So yeah, and wherever we can incorporate you, Vicky, and your exciting steps, then we will. I think it's all about collaboration and not competition, right?
100%. I already have one client of mine actually in mind that I think you should speak to.
Amazing.
So I'll drop you a message after our chat. But thank you so much for being with us today, Robyn. It was absolutely fantastic. I'll put all of the links and everything in the description box, and hopefully I'll get to speak to you soon as well.
Amazing. Thanks for having me, Vicky.